So, I've been triggered. By the by, video has nothing to do with actual bones or meat, but it's making parallels to take the good, throw out the bad. A type of philosophy, if you will, that can be applied to virtually anything. In today's episode, I'm making reference to individuals who are unable to simply take the good they can find out of a source and opt out of conflict over the rest. Needless to say, you can't appease them all, and we're likely failing if that's what we're trying to do. If some find what you have to say unpalatable, taking common sense offenses into account, unless you're a politician or evangelist asking for their belief, move on to someone willing to engage logically. As if masterfully concerted, the masses routinely reject views contrary to their own. Then, when trying to make analogical parallels, they haggle matters outside of appropriate context for the situation. Yet, you gamble credibility with straight talk since certain views or facts have to be sanitized to conform to palatability. Not everything is black and white. There are gray areas. Not everything is apples and oranges. They're not synonymous. If you can accept that kind of logic. Let's get started. Welcome to today's episode, likely to be entitled, You've Been Triggered, and as we continue, it'll become clear why. I've been thinking it might serve to benefit people if they could figure out how to eat the meat and spit out the bones. For you non-meat eaters, eat the produce and spit out the seeds, right? No? Therein lies the problem. Hypersensitivity. You didn't use the right simile for me. Your allegory is incorrect. I don't appreciate the metaphor. Why do I use figures of speech in the first place? Because it's close to impossible to speak candidly and directly about certain subjects, especially if they're deemed taboo. For decades, you didn't talk about politics or religion in polite company. Well, the neglected years of conversation have certainly done wonders. Nowadays in conversation, you have to be as strategic with your words as a rope walker is with their balance, articulate with your vocabulary so the other party isn't triggered in some way. Like vaccines, right? Yeah, I went there again because the media mantra and shaming is out of hand. No matter what your opinion is on vaccines, I don't make an argument for their effectiveness or ineffectiveness, so save your time. Although, that being said, the United States, California specifically, has some of the highest vaccination rates in the world, yet we're still taking it on the chops in terms of flu cases. What's worse, some of the people getting the flu have already had their inoculations, so much for that. We can all do the research. Anyone who's done it honestly can tell you pros and cons fall on both sides of the spectrum. The difference is in publication. To say they absolutely work is not factually valid. To say they're 100% harmful is not factually valid. The evidence suggests otherwise. Besides, it's because of such fervent pushback that Big Pharma finally decided to slowly offer less harmful alternatives, which is telling in itself. See, we have to look beyond the official pronouncements, not remain complacent, and refuse to substitute or pollute intellectual scrutiny for sentiment or public image. You know, it's getting crazy. People are thirsty for alternatives to the mainstream fake news outlets, but when they arrive on the scene, they expect high-end production quality, yet are paused when a creator decides to make a donation option available or collect a few coins from ad revenue. It's easy to sit back in the bleachers of the comment section as a keyboard warrior and be disengaged from real-world scenarios, but try this. If the state-run propaganda platforms are well paid for lying, why is there so much vitriol and scorn against those who are trying to tell the truth? If we're aligning our beliefs with certain ideals simply because they're endorsed by perceived authority, we're in a losing position. I say that because you can pay an expert to tell you virtually anything, and misinformation is rampant even within conventional sources. So I'll be the first to say you really do have to take things with a grain of salt. But there I go again, right? Probably just offended someone who keeps a sodium-free diet. I know I sound cynical, but I talk from experience. Take it from someone who actually has these conversations day to day, face to face with the very personality types I'm speaking of. It's heartbreaking. People can be triggered over the most subtle, trivial nuances. I still have friends in my circle questioning whether or not they should stop consuming known poisons. Again, known poisons. It doesn't take a super brain to figure this out. Perhaps a brain that isn't constantly assaulted with toxins would be able to make more concise choices more often and not remain on the fence when it comes to decision making. It seems like the reason it can be so difficult to communicate is the general public has been conditioned for only passive involvement outside their proverbial bubble. Again, conversational pivoting, but it's got to be done somewhere, and I'm going to tell you why I think that is. I can only speak for myself here, but as a researcher and independent investigator, I feel it's important to be able to effectively disseminate the information we accumulate. If we can't coherently deliver a message or data after we've come to an understanding of it, how can we aid others in its comprehension? To be emphatic, what good is our knowledge if it can't be readily communicated in an honest inquiry? This isn't about brilliance or intelligence, but wisdom, if you can appreciate that difference. Wisdom is proved right by its actions. You can be brilliant enough to fabricate a nuclear weapon, but you're wise if you don't. But apples and oranges, right? Let me be blunt, because I would rather speak 5 intelligible words to instruct others than 10,000 words in a tongue. Continually buying the company line, despite lack of transparency and verifiable evidence to the contrary, is mindless self-deception and reveals a deficiency of intellectual integrity. Cognitive dissonance we all have to overcome. Willful ignorance is a testimony of self-besmirched character. With all that's going on, with all that's happening, shouldn't we be more, I don't know, united? Have majority of us really fallen victim to the division campaigns that we don't see we're being manipulated? It's not left versus right, it's them against us. I know we wrestle not against flesh and blood, and that understanding alone would bring us all forward a little bit. The gentleman's deliberation is a fading art. Today, people supplant fact for theory and repetition. Just being aware of that brings us forward a little bit also. After all, it's easy to talk to those who agree with us, but I really think if you're in the business of standard model alternatives, you should equip yourself with the mental faculties for interpersonal communication. I have my style for my reasons, and as a content creator, I have the freedom to deviate from it when I feel it serves a purpose. I don't expect to make changes on the macro, but on the micro, things are constantly on the move for me. Never think or believe a small group of people can't affect the world. In fact, that's the only thing that ever consistently has. To help put that truth in perspective, majority of the world's wealth rests in the hands of a small group of people right now. And if you live in America, millions are affected by the whims of only a comparative handful. That should tell you something. And I know there are those that are going to make us stink because I didn't put a bunch of research on the screen as I was talking. Well, this is a open topic again, so bear with it. Look, we have to understand that although documentation and white papers go a long way in terms of source material, they don't always tend to encompass the esoteric, ethereal aspects often associated. That's to say, for some of the more supernatural or paranormal research, evidence may not fit into our nuts and bolts understanding of it. Let's take, for example, the unidentified aerial vehicle phenomena, which is documented as only partially physical. It may not be accompanied by traditional substantiation or verification measures and procedures. But before I let this get away from me, why don't I go ahead and end it here? If you've made it to the end, I recommend you like, share, and subscribe because there's going to be a lot more like this. And if you haven't already, go ahead and check out some of my other material. California Carter signing off.